Welcome in, everybody. We are diving deep today into the mind of a tech icon, Steve Jobs. We've got his own words right here in I, Steve, and we're going to unearth those philosophies, those ideas that made him such a force.
It's one thing to see the impact these kinds of leaders have, but to really get in there, understand what drove them, that's fascinating. It's not just history. It's like a roadmap to how Apple became Apple.
And speaking of Apple, Jobs was all about insanely great products, right? But he didn't just say it, he lived it. Everything started with an amazing product.
It's deeper than just setting the bar high, though. He believed that a truly great product could almost sell itself.
Real artist ship. Famous quote, but he really meant it.
Didn't always make it easy, though. He admitted he sometimes skipped market research, which could backfire. But then look at something like the iPod. Who knew we needed 1,000 songs in our pocket?
He just had this knack, didn't he? Seeing what people needed before they even knew it.
Yeah, and it's a good lesson. Sometimes you gotta trust your gut, even if it goes against what everyone else is saying. Jobs didn't just fill a gap in the market, he invented whole new categories.
But building a company like Apple, that's a team effort. And Jobs had some strong thoughts about leading those teams. Get this, he compared Apple to the Beatles.
Interesting comparison, right? But it's not just about being creative, it's that shared vision. That's what keeps everyone moving in the same direction, even when there are disagreements.
He wasn't afraid to make the tough calls, though. Building a great team sometimes means letting people go if they weren't the right fit.
And on the flip side, he was incredibly loyal to the people he brought on board, believed in things like stock options, making sure everyone shared in the success. He understood that sense of ownership.
And let's not forget about the competition. Jobs had no problem calling out what he saw as a lack of vision, especially when it came to companies like Microsoft.
He definitely had some thoughts. Respected Bill Gates' software skills, sure, but criticized their style, their lack of innovation. Remember the quote, "The only problem with Microsoft is they just have no taste."
And he kept going. He even said maybe Gates would have been a broader thinker if he'd had some different experiences.
Pretty bold thing to say about your competitor.
He said what he thought, that's for sure. But it's important to note that Jobs also saw the value in competition, believed it pushed everyone to do better, to constantly innovate.
It's like that saying, right? Iron sharpens iron. But, speaking of different perspectives, this one might surprise you. Jobs was hugely into Zen Buddhism.
Yeah, it does make you think a little, doesn't it? But when you look closer at his work, at Apple, you can really see that Zen influence, that focus on simplicity, on direct experience. Those were key for him.
It's almost like he approached product design like a Zen practice, stripping everything back to the bare essentials. Didn't he insist on organizing the Apple stores by solution zones? He did. And his team, they pushed back at first. Even Jobs said it cost them months. But he was set on it, convinced that presenting products based on the problem they solved for the customer, instead of just typical categories, was the way to go.
Willing to sacrifice short-term efficiency for a better customer experience? That really highlights that Zen influence, don't you think?
Totally. That focus on the present, on making things seamless and intuitive for the person using the product, that was fundamental to his whole approach. But Zen wasn't his only influence. He also found inspiration in some interesting places, like, get this, Bob Dylan.
Now that is some range. What's the connection there?
Jobs saw a kindred spirit in Dylan, another kind of artist in a way, even quoted him when he talked about taking risks, pushing creative boundaries. His philosophy was, if you're not risking failure, you're not really challenging yourself.
Interesting, right. Because he was so obsessed with simplicity. Seemingly opposite ideas, but somehow he made it work.
That was Jobs, full of these contradictions. But he always came back to those core values. Simplicity, pushing the limits, and a deep understanding of what it means to be human.
Like when he talked about the importance of a broad education. He famously dropped out of college, but then there's that story about the calligraphy class he took, how it had this huge impact on him.
And years later, all of that, those seemingly random experiences, they came together in the first Macintosh. Jobs really believed in connecting those dots, finding inspiration everywhere he could.
He surrounded himself with people from all walks of life too, didn't he?
He did. He knew that creativity often comes from mixing things up, bringing different perspectives together. And it wasn't just about different ways of thinking, but also finding people who were passionate about their work.
He knew that to create something truly great, you needed more than just skills on paper. You needed that fire, that drive to really make a dent in the universe. He wanted people who saw their work as more than just a job.
Absolutely. And he knew how to create an environment where that passion could flourish. He pushed people, challenged them, surrounded them with other talented individuals who shared that same drive.
Like that quote about Apple being a team sport played on a higher level. He even compared building a company to a band, everyone bringing their own unique talent, creating something amazing together.
And he valued technical skill, of course, but he knew technology on its own wasn't enough. Remember when he said, it's technology married with liberal arts, married with the humanities, that yields the results that make our hearts sing. He put just as much importance on the artistic side, the creativity.
He truly believed that real innovation happened when you combined technical brilliance with a deep understanding of the human experience. It was about making technology that was accessible, fun to use, even beautiful to look at.
And it wasn't just about the big picture. He obsessed over the smallest details, too. Like, remember the story about the very first iMac?
You mean when he insisted on using a really beautiful piece of wood for the back of the computer, the part that nobody would even see because it was facing the wall?
Exactly. That was Jobs, through and through. Believed in doing things right, even when nobody was looking. It's about that dedication to quality, to every single detail. And it shows. You can see that attention to detail in every Apple product.
He really did change the game, didn't he? And not just how we use technology, but how we think about it.
It was always about more than just the technology itself. He talked about that a lot. He wanted to create things that people could connect with, products that were easy to use, that looked amazing, products that told a story.
He had this endless curiosity, didn't he?
Yeah.
Always pushing the limits. Remember that quote where he said he'd trade all his technology for an afternoon with Socrates?
Always searching for that next big idea, that aha moment, and he wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo. It's better to be a pirate than to join the Navy, right? That was Jobs. Always.
Not afraid to take risks, that's for sure. Even if it meant going against the grain. And you got to admit, it worked. I mean, he took Apple from almost going under to becoming one of the most influential companies in the world. That's saying something.
It really speaks to the power of vision, doesn't it? That and a whole lot of hard work and dedication to being the best. Steve Jobs' influence, it's still felt today. He inspires people across all kinds of industries, not just tech.
So as we start to wrap up our deep dive into the mind of Steve Jobs, here's a question for everyone listening. What if you were starting a company today? What would you take from his approach, from his philosophies? What kind of dent in the universe do you want to make? Think about it.